Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Anyone Can Sew. I'm Hibiscus Stitch, and I've been sewing since 2005, so hopefully I know a thing or two and I can help you guys. Let me take this off. This is just getting in the way. Why do I have all these big badges? They are cute, and I will get more. So I hope to share with you guys the different things that I've learned over my sewing journey, from the basics to common mistakes to things you wouldn't think of and even more. And I'm not the only plush maker either. There's so many out there, so I can't wait to show off several plush makers from our community with you guys who have each had their own journey making plushies, and many of them have shared their first plush with us, so you can see that everyone starts somewhere. And also, throughout the panel, if any of you have any questions at any time, feel free to raise your hand. I'd be happy to answer any question you guys have. So I'll go ahead and show you where I got started. So this is some of my very first plushies right here. Lots of fleece and felt usage in these, especially the bottom ones. Those are some of my first one, and then it goes up from there. When I first started, I just wanted to make things that I didn't have toys of, and I tried all sorts of different arts and crafts, from like taping construction paper together to yarn dolls to everything. And then one day I just decided to try sewing two pieces of felt together. So I went to the store, I raided my grandma's cookie tin of supplies, and then I just kept sewing. I started sewing before Etsy was really a thing, and there were like no resources online yet. So that's why a lot of these first ones look kind of not that great. There just wasn't too many resources out there, but luckily there's plenty of resources out there for you now. Over the years of plush making got a lot easier as I made more and more things, and it was easier to visually grasp how to break things down into different shapes that I could fit together. So I am going to now embarrass you guys, or embarrass myself, not you guys, embarrass myself in front of you guys to show you my very first plush ever. It's Link. This is, you probably can't tell, this is Link from the Wind Waker Legend of Zelda game. He's terrible. He has two different colors of Sharpie marker on him. There's thread just everywhere, barely holding him together. And I still have him, but I did not bring him because he is fragile and I don't want him to fall apart. I do recommend that you keep, whatever first plushie that you make, or whatever art thing that you're trying to do, or drawing that you're trying to do. Keep your first ones, because if you ever get like stuck or in a rut, it's really good to like look back at where you came from. And so I'm going to get him off the screen because he's embarrassing. But it was all uphill from there. And here's some of the plushies that I've made in more recent years. And this is what will happen with you as well, with whatever art or hobby or life change you decide to do. It'll be really messy at first, but you have only up to go from there. So the hardest thing about sewing, or any project really, is getting started and figuring out what supplies you need. It's fun to imagine all the things that you can do when you go shopping and looking for all the different supplies, but it can also equally be overwhelming to see just all the fabric, all the threads, all the everything, and just not know where to start, where to get started, what to do. So we are going to hopefully help you know where to get started. So the first thing that you probably should do before you go to the store is try to figure out what's first project you would like to make. So there we go. Sorry, I got lost. So when you figure out what you want to make, that will determine what colors you want to get. For most of us, I assume it's going to be ponies, but for me it was Link. For others, it might be Pokemon. And there are plenty of resources online as well, from beginner guides, like So Desune here has tons of different beginner guides. I highly recommend checking out their website if you want to get started sewing. They have plenty of tutorials, they have patterns, they have all sorts of things on there. And different patterns on here are going to be of different IPs that you will recognize. So if you go on here, you might see, oh, I want to make Momo from Avatar. I want to make Lapras from Pokemon. And So Desune actually has pony patterns on there now too. So that's a great place to try different pony patterns as well. And since you already know the character and what it looks like, it'll be a lot easier for you to kind of figure out how those like patterns and pieces go together. Because when a lot of us started sewing, there was no patterns or anything online. Etsy didn't really exist back then. So a lot of makers got together and made patterns so that way you guys can start way ahead of where we did and go even further than what we did. And there are, of course, many different plush patterns on Etsy for purchase as well. These are just free ones right here. So Destiny also has ones that you can purchase on Etsy. There's so many different ones, especially if you want to look up ponies. There's standing ponies, laying ponies, beanie ponies, sitting ponies. Any type of pony you want to make, that you can find a pattern on Etsy for it. And these patterns will also help you get used to how, like I said, those 2D shapes will fit together. So for example, one of the first shapes that I learned to make was the ball. Using these 4 petals, you stitch them together, and when you turn inside out and stuff, it makes like a ball shape. This is one of the most basic shapes, and this was my starting point for less flat looking plushies. Like that link was just pretty much 2 pieces of fabric together, and a lot of my first ones were basically that type of shape too. And as you experiment with these shapes, you'll learn different things too. Like you can do the 4 petals here, or you can add a 5th petal to make the ball a little more round and give it a little more dynamic shape. The more petals you add, the more flat it will be, but the more round it will be. So there's all types of different things to experiment with. A lot of sewing is just trial and error and just like getting started, seeing what you want to do, going from there, trying different things, making mistakes. And here's some of my first experimentation with more advanced pattern making and not just the flat shapes. Some of these are still flat, like the Cubone's arms are just 2 like ovals stitched together. These are all like 2007 plushies, so like 2 years after I got started, very long time ago. I remember being so proud of the Cubone and the Typhlosion, especially because I had experimented with more complex shapes and made these more like 3D interesting shapes other than just like a ball. And nowadays I look at this and I'm like, oh, that's not that great. But back then it was really impressive. And as you get going, you'll learn different things too. Now that you have an idea of what you want to make, it's time to get shopping for those supplies. So when I first started, I used felt squares. All of these right here are all made from felt. They were 25 cents each, which was affordable for someone who was still getting an allowance. And despite what I did, I do not recommend felt as your first sewing material. There's no shame if it is, of course, like use what you have. But I found that one of the best materials to work with for beginners is fleece. Felt often, if you pull it too hard, will rip and tear, and it can be good for testing patterns, but it's not very good to like stick with. So fleece is really easy to find. You can find it at Joann, Walmart, whatever local craft store you have that's left near you, because most of them are closing down. Online, they all generally will have some sort of fleece. You can also find fleece blankets that are just one color, and you can cut those up and use those to try and test different things out. The fleece at these stores is also generally of a decent enough quality that you're not going to have any issues with material tearing if you pull too hard on it, which can and does happen with felt, like I said. And the stores that carry it will also usually have a large enough variety of colors that you can find what you need for what you're making. So like here you see several different colors. At the stores, you will generally find other different colors too. So you might not find the exact color you need, but you might find something close. Why are you coming to the panel late? What's wrong with you? Love you. Where was that?
That's your fault.
It is my fault. It's also pretty affordable too. This fleece is much cheaper than minky and furs and other different materials you'll find. And when you make mistakes, you won't feel like you've wasted that much. And making mistakes is one of the best ways to learn. Nothing beats some good old-fashioned trial and error. Some people even stick with fleece over other materials as their fabric of choice, and that is perfectly fine. You can absolutely stick with fleece. There's a lot of good quality fleece out there. I've seen far too often people give advice that you need XYZ expensive supply to start, and that just is not true. These are all things you will want to work up to. Heck, I still have plenty of supplies I want to work up to myself. Like I want to get a sublimation machine. I want to get a bigger embroidery machine. There's so many different things to work your way up to. And if you don't know if this is something you're going to stick with, you don't want to spend too much money on it. By all means, if you want to start with Minky, go for it, but there's no shame in practicing with some more affordable materials or what you have laying around. So, as for thread, if you are devoid of a cookie tin of sewing supplies laying around the house, I recommend getting some white thread and some black thread to get started. Those two colors will take care of the majority of projects you want. White for lighter colors and black for darker colors. And then as you get more into sewing, you can try all sorts of different colors. The basic Coats & Clark at Walmart or Joann is a great beginner thread to use. As you go on, you'll want to use some more durable threads, but that is just perfect for beginners. I always get it to travel with because if I lose it, it's no big deal. And eventually you'll work your way up to needing a thread rack, especially if you get into embroidering. As for needles, I use the Schmetz brand for my sewing machines, but you can find those at like Joann, Walmart has them too. You can find them pretty much anywhere. They're universal sewing needles. They also work on the embroidery machine too. And for the ones that I use to stitch with, a little in and out, I just kind of get whatever's at the store. There's really no quality difference I've noticed in those. If it can pierce through fabric, that's really all you need. And these tomatoes here are a great way to make sure your needles stay in place and don't end up in your foot, which has happened to me more times than I can count. Not fun. The chili attached to these tomatoes is actually filled with sand or metal or different things, depending on the brand. It's filled with different things that you can put your needle in and out of, and it helps sharpen your needle back up. Yeah, and if you have trouble, if you have trouble putting your thread through the needle hole, they make these little tools. They're super cheap. They're like at Walmart and everywhere that you can stick through the needle. I wish I had a slide to this, but yeah, you like stick it through the needle, you put your thread in, and then you can pull it through. So there's all types of different supplies. If you can't do something, don't worry. There is a tool out there that will help you do it. So I know this sewing machine does intimidate a lot of people, and it is a bit of a learning curve, especially if you haven't done much sewing. It intimidated me at first too. So I stuck with hand sewing for like years. I don't think I really had a dedicated sewing machine until like probably a good 4 or 5 years after I started, just broke college student. So this is my sewing machine. This is where the magic happens. I had a fancier one before this, but it broke right before a con and I needed a fast replacement. And this was $80 at Walmart. So I got it as a quick fix, but it's just worked so well, I have stuck with it. I will eventually replace it, but it's still working, so we're good. It worked, and I have lovingly covered it with a variety of different weird stickers. I do actually recommend this sewing machine as a good beginner sewing machine, especially if it's something if you're not 100% sure you're going to stick with. And I actually checked, there are now $88 at Walmart, so not much inflation here. This sewing machine is like, it's against inflation. It is not affected by it. So yeah, you can still go out there and get it for pretty cheap. It's also easy to swap the bobbin in and out. You can see at the bottom right here, you can easily swap the bobbin in and out, which was something on my other machine that I had a little trouble with. So that way you don't have any intimidation factors. You can just put the bobbin in there and ready to go. The bobbin is, you can kind of see one right here. It's what you put in the bottom of the machine so that way your thread can go through. So, and sewing machines are also great because they keep stitches exact and even, which when you're hand sewing, sometimes you can have some gapping and everything, but with the sewing machine, it's nice, it's even, it's straight lines, and they give you a lot more options to play with. And they speed up your sewing, which is really helpful if you're looking to make bigger plushies like Sombra here. But with the sewing machine does come a lot of additional things to keep in mind. For example, you will need to consider seam allowance. So here is a Sew Dessiné pattern that I'm showing off right here. When you're using the machine, you'll be stitching 2, sometimes more pieces of fabric together. And unlike hand sewing, you're not sticking strictly to the edge. So when you hand sew, you can pretty much stick close to the edge and it's not too much seam allowance to worry about. But when you're sewing, you want to go in a little bit. So you'll be stitching like along here. You can kind of see the lines right here on the pattern piece. And that way, when your sewing machine is going over it, you're making sure it's not getting too close to the end. You're making sure it's staying nice and even. And so that is called seam allowance. You can kind of see right there on the ears. When you turn them inside out, they're a little smaller because of the seam allowance. And now here is an advanced tip for you with that seam allowance. So this right here is a nice little graphic by Me Plus You. So you can kind of see on one side how there is the seam allowance. So when she's sewing, this is an Arcanine's fur. When she's sewing the little corners right there, it goes in, and if you turn it inside out, it creates the oh no side. But if you snip those little spots, like right here where this is going down, if you snip it to where the thread is through the seam allowance, you have nice, easy little triangles. I know this is a little more complicated of a tip. Once you get more into sewing, you kind of will get to understand that. Here's a bit of a easier to understand diagram. So like if you have a corner here, if you snip that right there, it'll become a nice, even shape. And if you have a nice little curve, if you snip a bunch of little lines, like right here, all along that curve, when you turn it inside out, you have a nice curve. It's just because when you have that seam allowance, like that extra fabric right here, it creates tension on the fabric, which is why it bunches up like that. So
cutting out a piece of it, or
you're just snipping. You're just snipping to the fabric. So if I had my scissors, I would just go snip, and you just turn it inside out after that. You can trim along it if you want to. I don't super recommend that just because it can be easy to cut too close and then the seam pops. Did you have a question? Sorry, I thought I saw someone's hand up. Okay. So, oh no, yeah, you're fine. Yeah, I know this is a little bit of an advanced tip. I do have this panel on YouTube, so if you ever want to like look back at any of this or even just contact me and ask me questions, absolutely can help you out. I know this is a little bit advanced, but this will give you your plushies like that nice, awesome finished look. So, next up is, okay, so next up is everyone's favorite fabric, Minky. So I started using Minky a few years after I used fleece. I started with felt, upgraded to fleece, and then upgraded to Minky. And I towed into it as I could afford colors. So I would just get like, if I was running low on my blue fleece, I would go ahead and get blue Minky and just kind of work my way up. A lot of my middle plushies in this period are made out of both like felt and Minky. So it's just what you can do. It's just working your way up through it. So Minky fabric is commonly used in baby blankets and baby toys, and it is known for its softness, and it gives everything a nice professional look. A lot of manufactured plush, like our lovely mascots here, are going to be made out of that Minky too. So it's a really nice look for your plushies. And being used for baby blankets, a lot of the Minky that you will find in stores will have that bumpy texture to it, which does suck because it makes it hard to find nice, normal, smooth Minky in the stores. But there are a few different websites you can get them from online. Like I use Cali Quilt Co. There's a few other places like that. You can also look on Amazon, although Amazon it can be a little harder to find because they're all different like stores. Oh yes, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, do you know why they make it bumpy? I've always wondered that. Is it just like a tactile thing?
I don't actually know why they make it the bumpy. I need to look that up and put it in here because I don't actually know why they make it bumpy. Maybe it's a texture thing for the babies. Yeah. That could be, I have no idea. That is a good question. You can, if you're really dedicated, iron out those bumps, but they will eventually start coming back, so I don't recommend doing that. And plus, it's horrible. And then the heat, if you don't do it right, can ruin the Minky because the Minky it's synthetic material, so it's made of plastic. So it can melt it if you're not careful. So yeah, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. Some people will use Big Z fabric for their Minky. Be careful with that. Sometimes the dyes can come out, so you might want to like make sure, check out reviews and everything and see if they're good about fixing things when that happens. But right now I don't recommend Big Z fabric for Minky. It's good for lighter colors, but for the darker colors, the dye can bleed a little bit. There's also Howl fabric, which is, they have really good quality Minky, but they are very slow at shipping it. So if you're like me, and do cons, it's not good for me at all because I can't guarantee it will arrive in any sort of time frame. But if you just want some to like experiment with and have time to wait, they're a good resource too. Cali Quilt Co is who I use, and there's a few other like Minnesota Quilt Co, Wisconsin Quilt Co. There's a few other state Quilt Co's that have their own Minky as well. But yeah, there's probably stores I don't even know about that have Minky. Ever since we lost fabric.com, it's kind of hard to find like one resource to get all your fabric at, unfortunately. And so with Minky, there is a pile to it, and it's just a fancy word for the way that the fabric fibers lay. So you can kind of see when you put it this way, it's nice and smooth, but if you put it this way, you can kind of see it creates like that sort of thing. It's kind of like when you pet a cat. They love being pet one way, but if you pet them the other way, they get angry. It's the same thing. So with Minky has generally a 3mm pile. So these little fabric piles, it's 3mm long. For comparison, the pile of fur is usually around 1 to 3 inches for most fur you'll find. Like he has a very short pile of fur on his little ruff over here. And with this pile, it becomes really important to familiarize yourself with how the pile lays on the fabric, because this pile can change the color that your plushie looks. So like if you're looking at it this way, it looks one color. If you're looking at it this way, it can look a different color. It's just all about how the light shines on the fabric. And all fabric fibers will have a way that they lay like that. If some fur will have it going in all different directions to give it like a weird texture. So most furs have it just one way. You can just experiment with different ways of how you like it. You might want the fur to go up and like go over the neck of the plushie. You might want it to go down and go smooth the rest of the back. It's all about just experimenting and finding what you like. And also you'll notice that there is a stretch to the fabric. For example, if I pull it this way, you can kind of see how it's stretching. But if I pull it this way, it's not stretching at all. And so with this stretch, you can do a lot of different things. It's really fun to experiment with the stretch and how it works for the plushies. So for example, the first kings I made, which are these two over here, I mistakenly used the stretch so he was thicker. So his arms are like stretching this way, his tummy, his head, everything is stretching this way. So you can kind of see it makes him look really chubby. Where the one here, I use the stretch so it's going this way. So his arms are longer, his legs are longer, his head's a bit longer, his horns are longer. And I think it gives him a much nicer look. But for some people, they might like the chubbier plushie better. It's all about just experimenting and finding what you like.
When you're putting together a plushie or even a pony, do you have to think about which way the fabric's laying while you're cutting?
Yes, you do. When I'm putting the pattern pieces on it, I have to several times I'll turn it over and be like, am I doing it the right way? And then turn it back. Sometimes I have accidentally cut it the wrong way and then I'm like, crap, and then I have to go back and cut it the right way. So yeah, there's a lot to keep in mind when you're sewing. And of course, it's all about preferences too. So you might like the fabric one way and you might like it another way. It's all just about what you like. And all fabrics will have stretch to them, including fleece. Fleece usually has a lot of stretch to it. And fur usually has less stretch to it, but there's still a slight stretch to all fabrics. The Minky at Joann has a very large stretch to it. I actually don't recommend Joann Minky. It's great for experimenting and learning with, but it is very low quality, and if you pull it too hard, it can rip. The fabric is also not that soft. The pile feels a little fake, like it feels kind of synthetic and almost sticky in a way. It's hard to explain. I am very picky about my fabrics. And so Joann is great for experimenting and for beginners, but eventually Kelly Quilt Co. and other places like that have Shannon Minky, and Shannon Minky is great. And if the only option you have near you is Hobby Lobby, Hobby Lobby's Minky is very thick. So like if you're trying to sew with it, it can be really harder to get the needle through it, harder than like this normal Minky. I don't know why. All these stores have just all their different Minkies. It's all about experimenting and seeing what works best for you. Now, plush making in any art really is not always a visible linear progression. While every piece you do teaches you something and helps you get better, not everything is going to look equally pretty along the way, especially as you try new shapes and new subjects. You are not always going to continuously make something better and better and better than the thing before it. Your line is going to go up and down, up and down. And so here's some early plushies to illustrate that point. The pictures are small because these are taking on like an ancient digital camera. So for every super cute Dragonite Poké Doll, you're going to have this awful Lillipup. This is horrible. I made a lot of Pokemon to start with. And then for every weird looking Trico with a butt head, there's going to be a Cloud Jumper. And so that happened to me, of course. The first ponies I made were 3 inches tall. I don't know why I did that to myself. They're like this big. They suck to make. I don't know why I did that to myself. Don't do that to yourself. Make them a little bit bigger. It'll be a lot easier on your hands. And the pinky here was the very first pony plush I ever made besides those 3-inch ones. The Cadence and Shining Armor are the 3-inch ones. And you can kind of tell that it doesn't have quite the pony shape to it. The eyes are made out of felt that I've stitched down. The hair doesn't look exactly right like her hair looks. But it's my first try, and that's kind of going to go with what you do. So, unfortunately, even if you make a first one, it doesn't guarantee your next one is going to look amazing. And my next pony after that looked really terrible. And I have her with me right here. Before I pull her out, I can't explain. There was a cute boy, and I wanted to give him a plushie. It's Rarity. Oh, she's horrible. This is awful. I made this. I made that, and I made this. Yeah, she's horrible. She's really bad. Age has also not been kind to her. Oh gosh. Her cutie mark is felt drawn on. It's so bad. No pictures of her exist, and I don't still have this by choice. Take your Rarity.
Thank you.
Yay, you got the boy.
I did get the boy, so maybe she's a blood plushie then after all.
You got a really good boy.
All right, that's the second time I've embarrassed myself this panel. And so, that's enough of her. Let's move on to a better plushie. I think you have this plushie.
Yes, I do. She's the first big purchase plushie that I made.
Oh, that's awesome.
We love her so much.
So if you have a sewing machine, one thing you can do with it is called applique. And applique is just a fancy word for smoothly stitching one piece of fabric over another piece of fabric on top of it in an ornamental way. So like with this Starlight Glimmer right here, you can see that I put the blue over the purple, and then there's a setting on the sewing machine that you just go along it, and it creates a nice stitch look to it. It's very nice. On my sewing machine, it's this option right here. On yours, it might be a different option. And it makes those tight zigzag stitches. And when I first started making eyes on plushies, I did the same thing. I used black thread. It gave it a nice toony look, but also I was broke, and so it kind of made them look uniform. It was something I could afford, and it didn't look too bad. But yeah, I just used that for my first ones before I got an embroidery machine or anything like that. And so, of course, now I use an embroidery machine. Sorry, I've been talking a lot today. So this is more of an advanced tips time because embroidery machines are very pricey. I won't go into them too in depth, but I'll give you a nice little brief overview of everything. My first one was a Walmart machine that worked in a 4x4 area, and that's just the area that it embroiders in. The current one I have is a Brother PE 800, Personal Embroidery 800. It's, they no longer make the PE 800s. I believe they're on PE 900 now. So I don't recommend this one just because it's expensive to get them now because they don't make them anymore. But if you look into them, do your research, you'll find lots of different models. I do recommend Brother though. Brother is just one of my favorite, especially if you're not able to afford the Genome or the Bernina or one of the thousands of dollar brands out there. So basically embroidery uses thread to put an image onto fabric. You can use this for eyes, markings, cutie marks, patches, the list goes on. Really, it's your imagination's the limit. To get this image onto your fabric, you have to run it through a special embroidery program that converts a picture into a file that the embroidery machine here can read. You can see right here, I am doing an eye for one of the beanies. And it's a big learning curve to figure out what the embroidery machine can handle because sometimes you'll look away from it for a second and it's on fire and you're like, what happened? And sometimes you'll just turn around for a second, you'll hear a weird noise and the needle is bent at an angle and you don't know what happened. There is a large learning curve with embroidery machines, but everyone goes through it. Don't feel bad if you're going through it because everyone goes through that. And it's this one right here, when I first bought it, was $800 on a Black Friday sale. So yeah, they are a nice big purchase. I don't recommend the ones at Walmart. Walmart has some for $300 to $400 in the 4x4 hoop area, which is perfect size for making eyes and cutie marks for your pony plushies. But the Walmart ones, I had two of them when I first started at different times. neither of them lasted more than like a year. They're not built to last. They're not very good machines. So when I first started sewing, I used a program called Sew Art, which I believe is $75 flat rate for life. It worked great as a way to practice and learn for the price. It was very simple, and the interface looked like it was from the 90s, and I fast outgrew it. It was very simple. There was not many options for you to do, but it was great, and it was what I could afford at the time. This is my current embroidery program that I use. This is called Hatch, and it was $100 a month for 12 months, so $1,200 overall. If you buy it all up front, it's $1,000, but I didn't have that kind of money at the time. So this is what Hatch looks like here, and this is one of those programs you use to convert an image into an embroidery file. So right here is Shining Armor, and you can see his cutie marks here. This over here shows kind of like the order that the stitches are going in. This shows the body outline here. His hooves are up this way more, but there's so many different ways to do it. There's so many different tutorials on YouTube too, all about this, if this is something you want to do. And also, if you don't want to mess with this, or this is too complicated, or this is not something you want to work with now, a lot of these programs also have free trials, thankfully, online. There are tons and tons of embroidery files you can buy on Etsy. For example, I use a lot of little side designs. I use Bakufun and Soapy Bacon to do some of the eyes and cutie marks that I have. Misty here, I made her cutie mark embroidery, and the eyes are from Little Side Designs. So there's tons of different ones that you can buy, and usually they're pretty inexpensive, and if someone's already made it, it can be a great way to save time too when you're making a plushie. And so another thing you can do with an embroidery machine is make what is called in the hoop plush, which is what these are right here. These are 2 Pikmins that I made. And it's when you embroider, like this right here is also an in the hoop plush. It's when you embroider like the hooves and the cutie marks, and then this is what's in the hoop, and then you put the other piece of fabric on top of it, and then it'll stitch around it, and you can turn it inside out, and you have a plushie. So that's what I did with these Pikmin right here. And so it's a great way, I know I explained it poorly, but you can kind of catch the drift of it. And it's a great way to make little plushies, little keychains, little beanies. It can even be used to make like a complex portion of a plushie. Like some people will use it to do horns with. Like a lot of the G5 horns have like their fancy swirls and everything. And some people will embroider that and then fold a piece of fabric over it and have it stitch it. So there's all types of different things you can do with that. And of course, there's a ton of different files you can buy on Etsy that have in the hoop plushies. There's so many different ones too. I am blanking on any off the top of my head. But yeah, if you go on Etsy and type in ITH in the hoop and plush, you will find tons that you can make yourself and buy. And so getting an embroidery machine is what gave me confidence to do conventions. And this was my first convention table right here. I'd always wanted to try them, but found excuses for why I couldn't or shouldn't. And the embroidery machine made it so those excuses no longer worked. And I've now been selling at cons for, it'll be 10 years next year. So it's been an amazing journey doing that type of stuff. And from my first table here to my Cider Fest table last year, it's been just, it's just been an amazing journey. And my first Brony convention, unfortunately, was the last Brony convention, which was a sad time to start this journey. Before that, I did mostly anime and gaming conventions, sometimes a furry con here or there. Nowadays, I still do anime and furry, but I really like pony conventions. Those are my favorite types of conventions to do. Pony people, no one appreciates plushies like pony people appreciate plushies. Yeah, plushies! I know I often say that what a fursuit is to a furry, a plushie is to a brony. We love our plushies, and they are pretty much what we carry around, what we have with us. They're what how we identify each other sometimes. So yeah, bronies love their plushies. So one thing I do occasionally is I will make the same thing that I've made before. I'll make it again and see how I've improved since the first thing was made. It's a common art challenge on Twitter and DeviantArt and other different art sites like that. And I definitely recommend it if you're ever like feeling stuck or feeling like you're not improving. So these Ocelises here, the very first one I made was from 2019. I had her at HarmonyCon 2020. And then the next one was from 2020 because I was wanting to try and make a more show accurate pattern. When I first started doing pony conventions, I was so used to doing anime cons that I made them like chibi, like anime people love their chibi plushies. And then here you can kind of see I did the stretch of the fabric. So it was this way, so that's why she's super tall and super skinny. And then on the next time I made her, which was 2022, I believe, I did the stretch so it was making her legs a little thicker, which meant that she could actually stand up a little better. And then the next one I did, I tried doing a laying pattern. I didn't really like how my laying pattern came out too much, but I'm glad I experimented and tried it. And then another one I recently did was with the Sphinx. I found out every 2 years I made a new Sphinx, so in 2023 last year I decided to make another one for Everfree actually. And so I have my very first Sphinx, which was at the last BronyCon, and then I tried something new with the open wings and the grin for 2021, and 2023 I just completely revamped the entire pattern. I made the face better, I made the body better, I made the wings better. She just looks better overall. And so 2025 next year, I'm excited to see what my next Sphinx will look like. I think I'm gonna do the toothy grin again. So I know this was just kind of like a brief overview of different things that go into plush making, things that you might not have thought about before, things that hopefully you've learned some things too, and just different things that you can now take with you and kind of see if that's something that you want to try. And of course this panel will be on YouTube, so if you ever want to reference it back, just look up Hibiscus Stitch, it'll be on there. So I will now close out this section of the panel because we do have another section introducing all of the, oh sorry, did you have a question?
Speaking of patterns, do you have any advice for following a pattern? They seem very complicated.
They do seem very complicated. Most patterns that you buy, like the So Dessiné ones that I showed, will come with instructions. So they'll actually have pictures going step by step showing how they made that plushie. So that way you can kind of visualize how it goes together. A lot of patterns will also, let me go back. Oh gosh, we went through so much together. Okay, so this one doesn't show here. You can see it says side E, but some patterns will have letters on them. So let's say like A here and B here. So then when you put the other piece of fabric with it, you can line up the A and the B. So that way it helps you visualize it. But yeah, a lot of patterns will have a tutorial section. That way you can go through it. And also there's a bunch of different plush resources. There's a pony plush Discord called Poner Plushies. If you go on Lil Shy FIM, he does a bunch of different YouTube videos. If you go on his Twitter, you can find like an invite link to it, or you can just shoot me a message, I can send you one. And there's a whole channel on there dedicated to people helping each other make plushies and share tips and things like that. So absolutely, someone can help you if you ever have any questions, but a lot of them do come with tutorials. Yeah, shout out. All right, where was it? All right, so I'm going to close out this section of the panel with this comic right here. We do have a nice little showcase of our plush makers after this. So this is one of my favorite comics to send to people if they're ever doubting themselves. So this little kid is crying. He goes, "My art sucks. How did you get good?" And he says, "By drawing a lot." And then he says, "But I've tried that. It didn't work." And he has like his little piles of drawings. And then the artist that he looks up to is saying, "Oh, well, keep trying." And he has a mountain of work. And it is so true. Recently, I got an email saying my Photo Bucket account was going to be deleted. So I was like, is there anything on there worth even saving? So I found hundreds of plushies that I forgot I even made. And like, most of them are terrible because they were in my like beginning stages. But all those plushies help form the foundation that I have made to like make something like the Sphinx down here. And every other plush artist that you like on Twitter or DeviantArt or wherever you're following them has a same mountain of plushies just like that. So it might seem like you're not doing what, everyone's style is different, but it might seem like you're not as good as them. That's not true. Like, they have their own mountain of work, and you will have your own mountain of work. You'll have your own journey to go on. So everyone that you see has a mountain like this behind them, and that's how they got to be good like they are today. So before I move on from this section, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
How do you avoid repetitive stress with muscles?
That's a bad question for me to answer because I sleep with a wrist brace on. No. Take breaks. Listen to your body. If your body is saying, "I'm done," take breaks. It is something I've had to do this year. So like, I've been making a little less plushies for conventions but my wrist is feeling a lot better lately. So just make sure you take breaks. If you find yourself sewing for like an hour or two and you're like, oh gosh, my hands, walk away from it. Go get a drink of water, go rest your hands, go do something else. Listen to your body, take breaks. And did you have a question?
I was gonna say, have you ever made your own OC, and have you ever thought about, like, I adore you, and I love to have you in my collection, honestly.
I need to make my own OC. The plushie server has been pressuring me into it because I keep telling them, tell me to make my own OC because I want to have one to like carry around to like identify me and have like an example at my table if everything is gone, like right now. I'll make two. No. I definitely need to. I have trouble making plushies for myself. I really do. So I do want to make my OC. I made the files for the embroidery, and that's about as far as I got. Any other questions? I cannot see anyone over here, unfortunately, because it's Summer's head. So, oh, did you have a question? Yes. Yeah, there's I still use polyfill. You can find it at Walmart. That's honestly the cheapest place I found it for. Joann, you can get it with a coupon for like a little cheaper, but Walmart you can get like the big box for, I think it's $32, $34 now. And I also use, Polyfill also makes poly pellets, which are the little beads. And you can find those sometimes at Walmart. They have them online. You can find them at different places and everything. It's better to buy them in a bigger bulk just because it'll be a little cheaper. Oh, did you have a question back there?
You make plushies out of natural fibers?
You can. I am not good at, I have never done it myself. So I wouldn't have any real advice to give, but I know people who have. I know people who have also done upcycle, like on old fur coats and made upcycle teddy bears and things like that. So it is absolutely possible. I just am not the best one to give advice on how to do that. All right, any other questions before we move on? Oh yes, what can I do?
Hi, I've made a few plushies, but I've only used like kind of basic, not basic things. I've had like an easy access to fabric. My question was, where do you find a good, decent price for making fabric? Because I'm like, okay, I'm looking it up. Oh, fabric.com. Oh, it's the company now. Where do I find it?
Yeah, since fabric.com left, it has been hard to find like one place to get Minky, unfortunately. I've been using Cali Quilt Co. They do run out of different colors a lot, probably because everyone else is trying to find different sites to use. Amazon can actually be a good place to like look and find different shop names to check out. Like I found out about Cali Quilt Co. from Rubio, and I also found out about another different type of Minky place. It was like Minnesota Quilt Co. or something. No, I don't remember what it was called. But I found out from looking up at color on Amazon, finding that shop name and going to their website, and I tried their Minky out. I didn't like their Minky, but it was nice to try out and find different places. How Fabric is another place that you can get Minky from. They're very slow to ship though. They can take 2 months sometimes to ship your order. So I don't super recommend them if you're wanting something faster. Big Z Fabric is another place that has really cheap Minky, but because of that, sometimes the dye is not the best. So some of the darker colors can rub off on your lighter colors. So unfortunately, there is no one good one-size-fits-all answer. There's also several Etsy shops that will sell Minky that you can try out. So it's unfortunately just trial and error. Cali Quilt Co. is who I recommend. They're who I order most of my Minky from. But since fabric.com closed down, there's really no one answer, unfortunately. And any other questions? All right, and if you guys, of course, think of any questions later, absolutely feel free. So now let's pivot to the creators of the fandom who have all had their own plush making journey, just like I did and shared with you. I spoke to many different makers. Come on, I'll go to sleep. I spoke to many different makers in the fandom, and I've had them show off some of their works as well as share some words with you guys to encourage you, and some also shared their very first plushies with me to share with you. So there's no better place to start than with Me Plush You. Everyone knows who Me Plush You is. She is amazing, one of the best makers in the fandom. She is an inspiration to me. She does these amazing video turnaround of her plushies on a Lazy Susan, and they're so good. And she wanted to share with you guys, here's some hopefully inspiring advice to go with these photos. I've been making pony plush for almost 10 years now, and I think it's important to keep it fun. Keep trying out new patterns, new techniques, new materials. Keep evolving. Like with any art, don't compare your work too much to others, but look at your own progress and see how far you've come. And here is her very first pony plush. As you can see, she has gone quite a journey from this is Pinky here, who is still super cute, to these right here. And now we're going to do a little bit of a speed run around because I talked way too much. So next up is Jack Larson. They're a maker from Russia who is really known for these nice fluffy synthetic hair manes. They're so cute. The Hasbro wishes they had brushable plushies this good. And next we have Basil Leafeon, our Jelly Pony. Absolutely adore Jelly Pony. Jelly Pony has, there's Sunny Star Scout's mom back there. That's a Jelly Pony. So cute. She's the nicest person ever. And like, I really love the way that Jelly does their eyes. And here is Jelly Pony's first plushie. Like, honestly, I love it. It's got such a good vibe. It is a great plush. And next we have Peruser of Pieces. I'm sure everyone knows this guy right here. He's so nice. He is so nice. And he does such awesome work. He's been experimenting with a lot of dynamic poses, like the Pinky and Cheese down there. So good. And this right here is their very first pony plushie. So, very cute. A lot of makers choose Pinky as their first pony plush. I don't know why, but she's fun. And then next up we have Rubio. Yeah, everyone loves Rubio's plushies. Oh my gosh, I love her Marina. She does the best ones. So here's some of her plushies here, and she was in the vendor hall this weekend. And her first plushie is this one right here, and oh my gosh, she used the Rose Minky for her first pony plush. That stuff is a nightmare to work with. So like, to use that for your first plushie, like, that's awesome. That is impressive. And so we also have Fleece Friendship here. Very cute. I love Fleece Friendship. They use iron-on material for the eyes, and as you can see, as I was saying earlier, you can stick with fleece if you want to. Look how awesome these fleece plushies look. And this is their first plushie ever. And like, kudos for doing Cadence. Most people, like I said, do Pinky. Doing Cadence with her complex hair, like, this is awesome for her first plushie. Very, very cute. And then one of my favorite makers is Chibi Pets. And she was at GalaCon, and she has just such the cutest plushies. She does have a Patreon where she shares different patterns of more complex plushies, so that's a great resource to go to for patterns. I love Chibi Pets. And then next up, we have Lumi the Kieran. There we go, I lost my spot. I love Lumi's plushies. Lumi does like this nice glitter on the eyes. Oh, it's so good. It's so cute. And this is Lumi's first pony plushie, which kudos for doing clothes on your first pony plush. That hoodie is so cute. And then next we have Allegrinix, who is a favorite of the plush Discord server. These are her little itty bitties. And then here are some of her other plushies. Big Flop Lestia has rocks in her hooves, so she's super floppy. And just so many different cute plushies. And the Chaos one right here is actually an upcycled plushie, so that's a different route you can do. You can upcycle old plushies. I've really gotten into doing that lately. It's so much fun. And next up, we have the beautiful, the wonderful QT Pony. Everyone loves QT Pony. He makes the best Fluttershies. He is turning red back there. And this is one of QT's very first pony plushies, this Twilight right here. And like, it's amazing. That plushie is amazing. Like, QT's plushies just keep getting better and better. We love QT. And last but not least is Blackwater plushies. Her plushies are much loved in the pony plush community. She has some really awesome Lang plushies. They're life size. They're awesome. And like, look at the details on Autumn Blaze's hoof here. That is so cool. So that will wrap up our plush feature. Sorry we did like a lightning round, but I was starting to almost like go over. So does anyone have any questions before we finish this section out and I say goodbye? No questions? No questions? All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming to the... Oh, wait. Hang on. You had a question. Yes.
It's more of a comment, but about like materials. I just like, I recently like thrifted a lot of really nice like fabric. And
yeah.
I thrifted like fabric and thread and like bunch of stuff. That I'm making like a plushie out of all kind of almost all thrifted materials.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun thing to do. you, but it's more like if you don't necessarily have a
Yeah.
specific thing in mind or you want to take inspiration from it. It was really
Thrifted material can definitely be really good, especially if you're making it like as a personal plushie. If you're making it to sell, sometimes thrifted isn't, and thrifted materials aren't as good, but it's a great way to get some stuff to experiment with and everything, because sometimes grandma will move or pass on and you'll find like the store just stocked with yarn and fabric and hordes of sewing supplies. So yeah, that's definitely a place to look, especially if you're just starting out and wanting to keep things cheap. Okay, so thank you guys so much for coming to the panel. I really appreciate it. Love you guys. Thank you.